All right, so I'm going to talk about what happens when you have a note that you take through the foreclosure process and then goes to the sheriff's auction. So this is something that confuses a lot of note investors because they're not used to being in the position of being the bank at a foreclosure auction. Maybe they've been a buyer as they've done other investments, but being the bank on that side can be a little confusing to folks. So I'm going to talk about a little bit of the process and some of the things to expect. So number one in the process is once you've completed the foreclosure and you get a date for the foreclosure auction, your attorney is going to ask you what to submit for your starting bid. So you, as the bank, are going to set that opening price. And in the next video, I'm going to talk about some of the considerations that go into how to set that price. But right now, I'm just going to talk about the overall process. So you're going to set some initial price. It's going to go to auction. And, one of two things are going to happen. Either someone's going to bid more than your starting price and they're going to buy the property and you're going to get paid, or no one is going to bid and you as the lender are actually going to take title to the property. Now, if it sells for more than what you owed, then you're not going to necessarily get all of those overage funds. They'll typically go to the borrower, or if there are other lien holders in line, they might get distributed different ways. But if no one matches your bid, now you're on title, you quote unquote win the auction and get title to the property. Now from there are a lot of things that can happen. If the borrower has left, then you've got an REO to decide what you want to do with next. Sometimes the borrower doesn't leave. So, now that you've completed your foreclosure, you might have to go through the eviction process to get them out before you can, proceed on with the deal. But assuming whether you get the property back and the borrower leaves, or you've gone through this eviction process, once you actually get an REO, you've got to decide what to do with the property. Now, for me personally, because all of my note investments are in states that I don't live in, I'm not local to any of them. Generally, unless it happens to be one of the markets where I have a really good team on the ground, I just want to sell the property as soon as possible and get rid of it. So I'm typically selling that to a local investor who's going to fix and flip it, or maybe turn it into a rental or something like that. However, your business model for notes might be different than mine, right? Like you might be local in this market and maybe you went into this non-performing note to foreclose on it and use that process as a low cost REO or low acquisition cost REO strategy. So you might be looking to fix and flip it yourself. You might be interested in turning it to a rental, or like even a turnkey rental or something like that. So to give you the kind of broad overview of how you want to approach this. So number one, you always want to understand what your personal goals are for the deal. So hopefully before you bought this note that you then foreclosed on, you kind of had an end in mind when you went into that, whether it was just, to get the property and do something else, or a lot of mine were non-performing notes that I was hoping to rehab the borrower, and I never wanted to end up at foreclosure auction, but sometimes you do anyways. So as you're making decisions through this process, or deciding where to set your opening bid, or deciding how much you want to take on an REO, or you just want to sell this thing, it's a very qualitative process. It's not the kind of thing like I love to build spreadsheets and create formulas. This end of the process is not really formulaic. It's much more qualitative. One of your other considerations on how much you want to take on the property or just sell it is you got to realize as you head into this foreclosure auction, right? One of the risks as a note buyer is you can see the outside of the house, but you can't see the inside of the house, right? And so your potential bidders at the foreclosure auction have that same problem. So one thing to consider is that, prior to possession of the REO, you have this extra risk factor in not being able to see the inside. And then once it becomes an REO, you know what's inside. And so from that standpoint that you have information, the risk factor is technically lower. But that's like the big reveal of, do you have something that's in decent shape where you're going to be able to have a home run deal, Or I've had some where you take them back, even when the outside looks pretty decent. Sometimes the inside is very rough, right? Like one thing to keep in mind with non-performing notes is people who, for whatever reason, neglect their finances, they tend to neglect a lot of other things in their life, including their home, and they're not necessarily doing a lot or any maintenance whatsoever, or cleaning for that matter. So, our general process as we head into these foreclosure auctions, we're going to gain as much information as we can, understand what our goals are, and then make the best decision. So in the next video, I'll talk a little bit about how to actually determine where you should set that bid price for the auction. So until next time, thanks for watching.